welcome to today's episode. We are on episode 26 of 365 of the year, and today we're going to be looking at the third part of the conversation on friendships. I've talked about what is a friend and my quadratic theory of friendships, and I've also talked about how to build friendships, especially in adulthood or after moving to a new country. And today I'll be talking about how to maintain friendships, especially with the business and responsibilities of adulthood. So stick around. Now, you've built your friendship or you're building it and you want to nurture it, you want it to grow, you want to maintain it. And the pillars of the quadratic theory, my quadratic theory of friendships, can also help in maintaining and nurturing your friendships and other kinds of relationships, really, but to the varying degree of importance or to the sphere that is focused on. I talked about a bit in the first part of the friendship series. So I think that based on reflections of what has worked for me in building friendships and maintaining friendships and led to that quadratic theory, the pillars that are most relevant for the maintaining and nurturing phase are vulnerability and commitment, because I think that the shared experiences, values, and interests pillar and the repeated exposure pillar are really what set the stage for the building of the friendship. Sometimes people do put vulnerability first and that leads to other things, but the way that I see it happen most often is shared experiences, repeated exposure first, and then vulnerability and commitment layer up on top of that to help you nurture and build your friendships. Now, when it comes to shared experiences, it's about you doing things together intentionally. Now that you've met in these larger groups, like in church, in school, at the mosque, at the gym, wherever, then making intentional decisions to narrow on that person or those 2, 3, 4 people that you have identified in those larger spaces as people you want to spend more time with, you want to develop something. So you have to do things together. You can go on a trip together, you can take a course together, you can cook or bake together. I have a friend that I made here when I moved to the Netherlands, and we occasionally bake together, and that's something that it's now our thing. We bake together. And it also goes into that repeated exposure thing. The more you do things together, the more that you are creating that frequency of meeting often. And it doesn't have to always be in person. You can do that repeated exposure virtually. You can have calls or video calls, call on the phone, whatever. But physically, in person is usually easier to build that kind of frequency in person. It makes it, I think that physical connection is very important. Not to say you can't do it virtually, but there's something to be said about physical connection especially in the building phase of that relationship. I'm also really psyched about the maintaining part, because I mentioned it in one of the earlier episodes of the podcast that one of the things that I want to focus on this year is deepening my relationship with the people that I have become friends with since moving, because the previous years was focused more on meeting as many people as possible to find the people that I wanted to really have in my closer in my circle of friends. And that is these are part of things that I'm going to be doing or that I'm already doing with those people, trying to spend one-on-one time with people where possible versus doing all my large gatherings and meeting them in larger things like somebody's birthday, or we're going on a group thing. But to spend, maybe not even, if I can't do one-on-one, maybe 3, 4 people max, just so that we can be more vulnerable with each other, because it tends to be easier to be vulnerable when you're in a smaller group or with just one other person. Which brings me to the next pillar, which is vulnerability, and where you start really talking about maintaining and nurturing. Now, the vulnerability part, which tends to be the hard part, tends to be the hardest part of this thing, because like I've said in previous episodes, you're literally opening yourself up, and that presents 2 possibilities: the possibility of hurt or the possibility of love. And it's a risk that you have to gauge whether you're willing to take it with a specific person. You have to be able to come out of yourself to take that risk to say this is the potential benefit and it is worth more to me than whatever possible hurt that I may face. And it's not like the person is literally stabbing you in the chest, although they may feel that way, but you still have to be willing to take that risk. And this means that you allow yourself to be shown up for. A lot of people focus more on showing up. I want to show up, I want to show up, I want to show up, which is great, and it's just a good thing to be able to show up for other people. But for your friendships to really have substance, I believe that you should be able to allow yourself to be shown up for. That means you should be able and willing to share the things that are burdening you, whatever challenges you're facing. I gave the example of when I needed to go to the doctor in the previous episode, and taking that risk to reach out to someone to say, I need you in this moment. Can you, do you have the freedom or ability to show up for me in this way at this time? And that is a very difficult thing to do. Asking for help for some reason we find to be very difficult, especially when it comes to personal situations. And really, it's if you don't give people the opportunity to show up for you because they don't know that you're going through something, then one, you can't hold them responsible for not showing up for you because nobody's a mind reader. And two, because you're not giving them those opportunities to show up for you, they themselves may question their priority in your life or their placement in your life, because I find it's very difficult to understand why you call somebody your close friend or your best friend and you can't share something that is a burden to you with them. But yeah, so share your needs, share the issues that you're facing, and not I'm not now saying that you should go and share your issues with everybody. If you feel like you're not ready, you're not yet sure that you want to trust this person with this thing, then that's fine. But don't go from a place of fear. One of my personal rules in life is to not operate from fear in making decisions. Um because most of the time we make bad decisions when we make decisions because we're afraid. And in my personal life and experience, all the times I made decisions because I was afraid it was a bad decision. So, but yes, there's a place for discernment, there's a place for being aware and all of that. But discernment and suspicion are not the same thing. So you can't be suspicious of every single person and be paranoid, right? You have to give yourself that freedom to be able to take the chance, give people a chance to show up for you, basically. And then for the last pillar, which is commitment, now is your turn to show up. You have to commit to showing up for people. You need to check in with them. You need to use technology. I highly recommend using technology for this part. I have all my friends' birthdays in my calendar. I have when I have a conversation with my friend and they're like, "Oh, I have this thing coming up next week, or I'm worried about this thing." I always put it in my reminder app. Check in with X person about Y topic, because if I don't write things down, I may forget. And it doesn't make me a bad friend because I forgot something. I'm a human being and I can't remember every single thing in this life. And so I'm helping myself by writing things down so that I can follow up with people. Sometimes I will even schedule a message. If the app that I was chatting on allows you to schedule a message, I will write it down already and then schedule it to go out when I want to actually follow up with them. Sometimes I even send my friends emails. My friend sent me an email one day randomly, and I still go back to read that email every so often because it was so beautiful. She prayed for me in it, and it was just so amazing. But yeah, so do things like that for your friends. Send them things that will help them in their growth. If they've expressed an issue to you, help them however you can. Doesn't mean that you have to give them $1 million, but if you can give them the $1 million. But I talked in a previous episode about how to show up for your friends, and I'll link to it in the show notes. But yeah, just think of ways that you can be a support system for your friends, for the people that you hold dear. And these are the ways that you maintain and nurture your friendships. Check in on them when they tell you something has happened or they plan to do something. Check in. Send them resources that can help them. Remember the important life events. Send them help in whatever way you can. And when you can show up physically, do that. It's always a delight and it's so thrilling to show up for somebody in a way that it makes them so excited and makes them feel loved, because like it's just so amazing. So when you can do that, do that. So to recap, let's do a quick recap. So recap. Based on the quadratic theory of friendships, meaning that you need shared experiences, values, and interests, you need repeated exposure, you need vulnerability, and you need commitment. The things that you can do to maintain and nurture your friendships are to do things together, to go out of your way to set things up, to do things together with your friends. You need to also do those things frequently. Create a cadence. If it's going to dinner once a month or visiting each other every 2 weeks, that kind of thing, just create some level of frequency. Then allow yourself to be shown up for. Ask for help when you need it. Share your needs. And finally, in commitment, help them, show up for them, check in with them, set reminders, use your calendar, remember important life events and birthdays. You don't have to remember in your brain, you can remember it with your calendar. So yeah, I hope this helps. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of A Couple of Things. If you enjoyed this episode or found any part of it insightful, don't forget to share with your friends on your social media, and be sure to leave a comment or a review if you can on your podcast listening app. Thank you.